What's up, guys? This is Matt from Force Fitness and Performance. In case you missed part 1 of this lecture, you can check out Force Fitness's YouTube page. We talked about setting up a different context for understanding your nutritional choices and how they affect your body. And now we are going to go into the meat and potatoes of the presentation, meat and sweet potatoes of the presentation. Eating healthy on a budget. So one of the biggest objections that we hear is, I want to do this, but it just doesn't fit in my budget. Eating whole foods, eating organic, eating these different things is just so expensive. It's too expensive to eat this way. I could never afford to feed my whole family this way. Or maybe, I'd eat this way, but my husband would never eat this way because he thinks it's too expensive. Or I'm on a student budget. Or have you seen how expensive grass-fed meat is? I mean, come on, right? These are objections that everyone has to deal with, and it's something that my wife, Valerie, and I have been really focused on these last couple of months is setting up systems for ourselves that allow us to eat this way, eat what's best for our health, and also something that's healthy for our wallet and not really damaging us there. So that is a totally common response. And I kind of have one question for you because this is going to be where we take this. Do you like to cook, or who likes to cook? And in the presentation, I asked everyone who likes to cook, and then I showed them this, and they all were so happy to volunteer to sign up and cook for me throughout the week. But it was pretty fun. But seriously, though, cooking is one of the first steps to saving money. And what really needs to happen with cooking is that there needs to be a plan. And you can think of the 7 P's, right? Prior planning prevents piss poor performance, something like that. But what I want to talk to you about is this meal planning flow that we have set up. And there's 4 simple steps to your meal planning flow. And if you use this, you will save money because everything will become more efficient. So the first thing we need to do is shop your fridge. I don't know if you're like me, but some of you out there have probably gone through it where the meat is sat a little too long in the freezer and you kind of have to get rid of it, or you forgot you had a vegetable stuck in the back of the crisper drawer and now it's just gooey and melting all over everything else in the drawer, and you're like, this was such a nice piece of food. I can't believe it's going to waste. It just kills me. It's like a steak knife to the heart every time it happens. So one thing that I learned the hard way to do is that the first stop on any grocery store trip needs to be your own fridge and pantry. And it will help you more if you even keep a running document, maybe of the meat you have available in your freezer. My wife and I just went through our freezer the other day and realized that we had over 80 pounds of meat that had been built up from these different sales we'd gone to and from buying meat from our local CSA. And that's just ridiculous. We don't need to spend any money on meat then, right? But if we hadn't done that and kind of taken stock of it, we wouldn't know. So shop your fridge first and foremost. What do you have available? Your second step is going to be to shop seasonally. So there'll be a link at the end of the slide or in the notes of this video to the Whole Nines Seasonal Produce Guide. It's an awesome resource. It tells you which fruits and vegetables are going to be in season throughout the year, which is the reason we do that is because that is going to be the most nutrient-dense foods you can get at that time. And we'll get into this in more detail, but when you ship things internationally, they tend to not maintain their nutrient value very well. So we're going to look at that seasonal list and pick out some foods that are going to be in season. And then from there, we're going to go and we're going to plan our meals. And this is where you can use all the tips and tricks in the book. You can look at cookbooks. You can go online. There's a cool site called thefoodie.com, not just foodie.com, but thefoodie.com. And they'll help you plan your meals and print out a grocery list for what you need. But plan your meals, and then finally you'll fill in the blanks. So you'll go out with your specific grocery list of what you need to get in order to cook your meals for the week or for the next couple days. And you'll do that, and you won't come out of the store with anything else, because that's how we save money, is we make sure we're efficient with our meal planning and our time and our dollar. And this really helps us make good decisions, not only in the grocery store, but for ourselves throughout the week, because now I have set up. It's so easy to go in and grab something that's already been pre-cooked that I've spent time preparing and heat that up, rather than just grabbing something quickly on the go. I've made my food environment, I've altered my food environment so that it's easier for me to make a good decision than it is to make a poor decision. So that's pretty cool. Let's get into this in a little bit more detail. So with meal planning, there are a ton of different ways to organize how, once you look through your fridge and your pantry and you look for seasonal produce, how you're going to plan your meals. One thing that we really like to do is have theme nights. You can kind of sit down with your family, involve your kids with this. It makes it really fun. But just pick, for example, Monday through Friday. Each night is going to represent a different type of food that you're going to have. So maybe Monday is Mexican night. Tuesday is Asian. Wednesday, you're going to do something in the crock pot. Thursday, you're going to do surf and turf. So you're going to do maybe like steak or fish or baked chicken. And Friday, you're going to do a chili or a soup. This makes it really easy, because one of the things that I find happens with meal planning and all these giant cookbooks is paralysis by analysis. You're like, well, where do I even start? There's so much out there. But if I know that I'm going to make Mexican, because we enjoy Mexican food, that means I could do fish tacos, or I could do a ground beef, grass-fed beef taco salad. You do a ton of different options within that theme, but it just kind of helps narrow our focus, and it keeps things fun. We really enjoy that. The other way you can kind of meal plan is what we call Three's Company. And this is something that my wife came up with, and it's just an easy way to cook and be efficient in the kitchen with your time. You have one thing on the stovetop, one thing in the oven, and one thing in the crock pot. So those 3 meals you can be preparing at any one time and kind of be efficient with your time. Normally, we cook at least twice a week to kind of prep meals for the week, because your fruits and vegetables are going to go bad quickly. Not just go bad, but they're going to lose their nutrient density quickly, which is part of what you're paying for. So that's another aspect of saving money on your food, is making sure you're getting the most nutrition you can out of those foods. So we might cook on Sunday night, and then again on Wednesday, and then on the weekends when we have more time available, we will maybe cook meal to meal, so that we can have fun with cooking and spending time around each other on the weekends. But these are some different ways that you could organize your meal planning. It's really up to you. Just find something that works and that is fun. Eating this way should not ever be boring. There are so many different possibilities and ways to cook and enjoy these foods and enjoy different spices and really expand your palate and your horizons, that you should just never feel bored with it. And then, so the next part, after we have designed our meals and we have our ways to keep everything very efficient, we want to look at our grocery shopping order of priority. And the mindset we can really use here is use the good, better, best checklist. You don't always have to get the best foods all the time. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Just do as much as you can to feed yourself and your family the best nutrition you can. And as far as time, our money spent at the grocery store, at the farmer's market, these are the order of operations that we want to go into for how we're going to spend that money. So the first thing we're going to spend our money on, or look for higher quality of, are meat, fish, and eggs. And that's because for us, the alternative is a pretty steep drop-off. Okay, we're going to lose a lot of nutritional value and lose some of the healthy fats that come from those pastured animals. The second thing we're going to go to is produce. And again, we're going to look for seasonal. And we'll talk about Do we need to go organic? What food should we go organic with? But we're going to spend our money on produce. And then finally, we're going to spend money on fats, on those cooking oils and other things to go into. And we're going to look at each of these in more detail and give you guys some ideas of what you can do with this. So let's go ahead and look at meat, fish, and eggs. And we have We Farm, the Wayne Engelnoff Farm. And this is a local farm that we have partnered with. So you can actually get your meat delivered to Force every quarter and be able to pick it up and have it be local and grass-fed. And this is a really, really awesome way to get your meat. For example, if you go to Kroger now, they'll have grass-fed meat at about $7 a pound. But if you go through the We Farm, not only is it going to be grass-fed and local, it's going to be about $4.50 a pound by comparison. So you're just getting a much better deal. And there's lots of ways that you can find different CSAs like this to take advantage of. We are so lucky to live in Bloomington. We have such a strong farm community in the farmers market. There are just a ton of options for us here. So part of the battle with understanding how to spend your money on meat, fish, and eggs are labels. And there are a ton of things that are labeled, and you're like, oh, should I spend? Is that worth more money to me or not? So a couple things to think about. Grass-fed. Grass-fed is something we do highly recommend. However, grass-fed does not mean that the animals were fed grass for their whole life. A lot of times, farmers will feed the cattle grain for the last 30 to 90 days in order to fatten them up and make their meat more appetizing for the modern consumer. Okay, so grass-fed is good, but maybe it's not best. Our best case scenario would be grass-finished, which means that the animal has, in fact, eaten grass for its full life. Then we have organic. And organic is really tricky because there are a very specific set of criteria that they have to meet in order to be organic. And it can be very difficult for local small-time farmers to pay for and pass those inspections. And it's not necessarily an indicator of better nutrition. It might be an indicator that there's less toxins in something, but not necessarily a better nutrition. So organic, I'm kind of like, does your meat need to be organic? Maybe not. Really depends on the source. I would look more at where the source of the meat comes from than whether or not it has the organic label. Same thing with natural. Natural basically means anything. I mean, I get you could say that it's all natural arsenic is in your meat. I mean, there's really not a lot of regulation here, and it doesn't really tell you anything. So I've fallen into that trap before where I see something labeled as natural. I'm like, oh, okay, that must be better. Honestly, it really doesn't tell you a lot. And if natural is the only label on something, it might not be worth the extra money. Cage-free. So cage-free especially is mainly with eggs. And this also gets really tricky because cage-free might mean that the animal has access to a very, very small space outside for only an hour a day. That's as much as it needs to be considered cage-free, and it can be penned up the rest of the time. What we really like with eggs is pastured eggs, which means the chicken's been out on the pasture, been able to eat bugs and just kind of scavenge around, and that's going to be a really healthy fatty acid profile for our chicken meat and eggs. And then finally with fish, we do like wild caught. But this is, again, something that you can monitor. I will have a link to this as well in the notes, kind of looking at what seafood is the healthiest or has the least toxins at different times. And there are a bunch of different groups that watch that and monitor that for us, which is really cool. But wild caught would be preferable over farmed. And the reason for most of this is, I think about it this way. If I eat a healthy animal, I'm more likely to be healthy myself. If I eat a sick animal, less so. So when animals are kind of fed a non-natural diet or force-fed like a grain-based diet or maybe kept in feedlots and stuff, we actually see this come through in the quality of the meat, especially in the fatty portions of the meat. So when something is grass-fed, they have a very nice omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. You might have heard of the omega fats before, but grass-fed beef actually has a very similar omega-3 content to wild-caught salmon, which is something that we've heard of fish oil. You should take fish oil because it's good for your heart and all these other things. Grass-fed beef, also super healthy, has a great fat profile. Now, again, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. So if you're not able to get these high-end meats, because they are more expensive right now, they're becoming less expensive, but they are more expensive in general, just do the best you can. And if you do get a lower quality cut of meat, you might want to cut off the fat because the fat can store toxins if that animal has been exposed to them. So just something to keep in mind. And this is why we really want to put our money into local grass-fed healthy meats. Then we get into produce, and this is its own bag of tricks right here. But the one thing I want you to really think about with produce is that local and seasonal is going to be more important than organic. When the food is seasonal, that means it is ripe, it is ready to be eaten. It's going to have the highest content of nutrients at that time. And when it's local, it means that not only are you supporting your local community, but it hasn't had a long travel time. It hasn't been shipped for weeks. So, for example, tomatoes. I know tomatoes, when they're shipped from abroad, are picked when they're just starting to turn red, and they're still green. And they use ethylene gas to force the tomatoes to ripen when they get on location. And that tends to, when you do it that way, when the plant is not allowed to ripen naturally or on the stem, it does not have the same nutrient content. And this was something I really noticed living abroad in Japan. Tomatoes in Japan, they would be small, and they would slice them up like fruit. For your breakfast. It would be like a side dish just all on its own because it was so flavorful. And if you compare that to our beefsteak tomatoes that we have here, the big ones that you see maybe at Subway and the sandwiches and different things like that, they're watery. They don't have a lot of flavor. And when they don't have a lot of flavor, they usually also don't have a lot of nutrient density. And we talked about the organic label and how that can be a little bit misleading. So when we think about how to spend our money best, we want to look at nutrient density over labels. And so seasonal and local are going to be what you want to go towards rather than organic. We can look at lists of the Dirty Dozen. You guys have probably heard of that before, but the 12 fruits and vegetables that are most likely to have pesticides and other chemicals on them that you want to avoid. So on this list, we see stuff like peaches, apples, bell peppers, celery, nectarines, strawberries, cherries, pears, grapes, spinach, lettuce, potatoes. So those are things that you would want to buy organic. But then we also have the least contaminated foods like onions, avocado, asparagus, sweet peas, bananas, broccoli. Those things are going to be okay for you to not buy organic because the difference isn't going to be as drastic. Another thing we can really get into is the storage with nutrient density. So this is one of my favorite books right now. I'm about 3/4 of the way through it. It's called Eating on the Wild Side. And this is basically your guide to super hacking your nutrient intake from fruits and vegetables. It's going to talk about what species of or what types of tomatoes, for example, have more nutrient value, have the phytonutrients in them. So phytonutrients are portions of fruits and vegetables that we are just beginning to understand. We've identified over 10,000 of them at this point. They are different than normal vitamins and minerals, but they are part of the plant, and they seem to have a lot of anti-cancer and anti-inflammatory properties, so stuff that's super healthy for us. And that's why we really focus on eating whole foods. You can't just break it down into the nutrients. We can't just eat carbohydrate or eat a pill of vitamin C and expect we're going to get all the benefit that we could have gotten from eating the whole food. So I highly, highly recommend checking out this book. And just a couple tips and tricks I've picked up so far, especially with vegetables. You kind of want to follow the edges of the rainbow. If you look for the lettuce and other fruits and vegetables that are more reddish or purplish in color, they're going to have a much higher antioxidant content, be much healthier for you, and they'll also have they won't be as dumbed down as some of our modern varieties. A simple switch with tomatoes. Cherry tomatoes still have a ton of lycopene in them as opposed to sandwich tomatoes. And perhaps one of the most interesting ones, tidbits I picked up, is how to store a lot of our fruits and vegetables. So if we get a Ziploc bag and take a pin and just prick between 10 and 20 holes in that bag, we can effectively reduce the rate at which those fruits and vegetables respire and expire. So stuff like spinach. This past week, I don't know if you guys ever buy those giant spinach tins, but it always seems like I can't get through it before it starts going bad. I brought it home. I immediately parceled the spinach out into different bags, sealed them up, pin pricked them, and stuck them in the crisper drawer, and they were as good as new for about 4 days. So that's an awesome way to maintain the high nutrient quality of your food, so you're not losing nutrients. As time goes on, those nutrients will degrade. So definitely check this book out, and this is just another way to take everything to the next level. And then finally, we have fats. So what do we want to spend our money on in the fat aisle? We want to spend money on cooking oils like coconut and extra virgin olive oil, avocados, olives, all of these different healthy fats that we can use to add flavor to our food and to cook with. What we want to avoid, and I know a lot of you are going to be upset about this, but if you're on a budget, we need to avoid nuts and nut butters. They're just not a high enough priority. Nuts have a lot of omega-6 in them, which is that fat that we want to try to lower our overall intake of. They do have a good content of nutrients, but it's not a priority. It's not a priority, especially based on how expensive they are. And nut butters, if nuts are expensive, nut butters are even more expensive for what you get out of them. And they're probably, unless you make your own or go to a specialty store, a lot of them are going to have added sugars and added oils, stuff that we want to avoid. They're just not a high enough nutrient content for us. Okay. So I hope that helps you understand how we can start looking at this. When we look at how we want to spend our dollar and save money, the first two steps are meal planning and making sure that we're not wasting food. And then the second step is putting our dollar where it's going to be most effective. Where are we going to get the most benefit from buying the higher quality foods? And how are we going to be able to increase or maintain the nutrient density of those foods for as long as possible? Next up in our next part of this presentation, I'm going to go into more detail about money-saving tips and tricks beyond meal planning and picking nutrient-dense foods. And hopefully we'll be able to finish out the presentation on that next part and give you guys a lot of tools to work with in order to make this lifestyle, this healthy lifestyle that's going to empower you to be energetic and full of vitality, more affordable for you and your family.